Welcome to episode 65 of Fascinating, a Star Trek podcast. Plato's Stepchildren.
In this week's episode, Kirk, Spock and McCoy travel to a planet to provide assistance to a gravely ill leader. On his recovery, the man seeks to prevent McCoy from leaving in case of any future maladies. When the Doctor refuses, Kirk and Spock are exploited in a series of humiliations intended to persuade him to remain. But will bones break? Or can his resolve hold long enough for his captain to turn the tables?
Are there other Platonians like you?
What do you mean, like me?
Who don't have the psychokinetic ability?
I thought you were talking about my size. Because they make fun of me for my size.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you, Gerry?
I'm okay.
Anyone been making fun of you for your size?
Never. Not since I was 3 foot tall.
Fair enough.
Now, this episode gets a bad press.
Because it's bad.
Possibly my top 3 episodes.
No.
Yes.
It's terrible.
This is misunderstood, underappreciated. It's comedy gold.
It's not good.
It's fantastic. I don't think I've enjoyed an episode as much as this one.
Really?
Yeah. I thought it was brilliant.
Oh dear. I thought it was not just bad, it was appalling and maybe one of the worst shows of any TV series that I've ever watched.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
No. This was genius.
Yeah.
I genuinely laughed out loud 2 or 3 times.
Really?
Yeah.
And things that they wanted you to laugh out loud at?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay.
And I have to say as well that the main guest star, Alexander, brilliant. Loved him. His charisma was inversely proportional to his physical stature. He was amazing on the screen. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was one of the ones who elevated the episode.
Okay. It's not the first time that we've had an episode with an anti-intellectual slant.
No.
They make out folk with massive brains to be idle or lazy. It's an
inverse snobbery.
Yeah, it's like the only work is physical work.
Yeah.
And anything else is just... Yeah.
That's a sort of an old... You see that a lot with older folk who... Oh, what do you do? Work in computers? Oh, that must be hard. Or something like that.
Sit around all day.
Yeah. You know, we were down a coal mine. That's real work, not that namby-pamby.
You should go up a chimney. The best thing, though, about this episode, in my opinion, is it only has 10 scenes.
Well, they were very long scenes. I noted that.
Yeah. We'll be done in half an hour, so it's fine.
We won't be done in half an hour. There's a lot to get on with here.
Well, that being the case, should we begin?
Why not? Let's crack on.
We start with the captain's log.
5784.2.
There are desperate distress calls coming from an unknown planet. But Mr. Spock can't account for it because there's nobody living on the planet according to his scans.
Wrong again. How many times in recent weeks is this? Definitely no people here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He does report, however, there are rich kernite deposits, which is a rare and long-lasting source of power.
Is kernite invented for this?
I imagine so.
Yeah, it's not a thing, is it?
I don't think so.
Okay, I knew that.
Yeah.
So we're down on the planet. Kirk, Spock and McCoy have beamed down to a place styled like ancient Greece, and they are met with a large shadow.
An echoey voice.
Followed by a small man.
Yeah.
That reminded me... Every time I say this, I know the answer. Have you seen Top Secret with Val Kilmer?
No.
No, of course you've not. It's almost like a scene from that, like a spoof, where you see the large shadow, and it's a wee chap.
I'm sure the credits to a cartoon, as well, Darkwing Duck or something, had a big shadow, and then it zoomed in, and it was the small character.
He introduces himself with a flourish as who?
Alexander.
Who he claims is at their service, and tells them that he sings and dances, and is also a great loser.
Apparently they should remember this. Kirk asks him who lives on the planet, and he's told about the Platonians.
Yeah, give us some background.
So this is a group of people who originated in the Sandara system, but the star went nova, so they moved. They lived on Earth at some point, took a keen interest in the teachings of Plato, and they have a philosopher king who calls them Plato's children. But Alexander believes more like stepchildren. I don't know what the distinction
Roll
is there.
credits. Well, they're maybe not treated with the same amount of love and respect that
Real children, maybe?
Well, they are real children, but not real.
Red-headed stepchild
That
sort
type
of
of
thing.
thing, yeah. He is then summoned by a physical force pulling him, and we see the first of some wonderful physical acting in this episode as he's dragged backwards and the guys follow. That's another strong point, another positive for this episode.
It's not.
It is.
It's not. It's one of those things that you would do the first day at drama club. Act like you're being dragged out the room.
Yeah.
And they make a whole episode out of it.
I'm not saying that it's brilliant to watch this. It might be bad. That's one of the... I had a smile on my face, I have to say. The geeks and the nerds are wrong. I have looked up the best Star Trek episodes, the worst. There's all these lists, isn't there? And they generally follow, City on the Edge of Forever is always in the top 1 or 2, and Spock's brain in this tends to be found in the bottom 2 or 3. And I think these nerds are wrong. They don't understand it. They're totally missing. This is genius. This is brilliant.
I think I am on their side.
No. And also I think that the underlying story, the theme of it, I just think it's a strong episode.
Okay, we'll carry on.
Continues to prove that season 3 is in fact the best.
We move through to a chamber where a man is lying on a couch and his wife welcomes the 3 men.
Yeah, she's Felina and he is Parman.
Yes, she asks which of them is the doctor before explaining to McCoy, when he identifies himself, that the problem is with her husband's leg. Yeah,
he has a look at it and it's obviously rancid because McCoy is quite taken aback by it.
Yes, it must smell quite bad.
Yeah, he tells Parman that it should have been attended to before now, and the prone patient admits that it was due to ignorance on his part. So, McCoy goes to give him a hypo.
He does, but he's not allowed to do so.
Why not? What happens?
The man seems to want to take over by himself, and he lifts the hypo using some invisible power.
Yeah, some telekinesis or whatever.
He injects himself.
It seems like that's a bit... You're over-engineering the solution here. You don't need to use mind control for everything. It'd have been easier to use your
he maybe
hand.
feels like he does.
Yeah.
Anyway, across the room, we see Alexander lamenting that the people who have come to help do not deserve to die, which sounds a bit ominous.
Yeah, but he is stopped by being forced to bite his own hand.
There's 2 other Platonians in the room who look on.
This brings us to the credits, and we return to this chamber a little later with a captain's log, 5784.3.
Yes, McCoy is now treating this leader. The planet Nova is explained once again. A little bit of an update about the Greek civilization and the fact they now live in this utopia patterned after the ancient Greeks of Earth.
We return to McCoy telling Parman that he doesn't have an answer yet for his condition, but he should handle the medical equipment from now on.
Yeah, he's not wanting it all played with by patients.
He then confers with Spock and Kirk and admits that he isn't sure how he can stop the infection, as his tricorder doesn't have any local information. And at the same time, we see Alex playing a game.
Yeah, it's like a life-size chess type thing.
I should say I shorten Alexander to Alex.
It's a tribute.
Yeah, it's just because I'm lazy. I'm not writing Alexander. So if I do say Alex, I mean Alexander.
Sure. I like the fact that you can't interpret that from your own notes. You have to read exactly what you've written.
Listen, I just say what I see.
In any event, Alexander loses this game that he's playing, and the other 2 men he's playing with leave.
Yeah, he loses because they use their telekinesis.
Yeah. He's a good loser, though. He's told us that already.
Felina then joins them, and they ask her about the abilities they seem to possess.
This psychokinetic power of yours, how long have you had it?
2.5. Ever since our arrival here on Plutonius.
How is the power transmitted?
Brainwaves.
Do these waves cease while you are asleep?
No, not if they're embedded in the unconscious.
What about medicine? Why no doctors?
We haven't had any pressing need for the medical arts. You see, while still on Sandara, we instituted a mass eugenics program. We're the result. Pared down to a population of 38, we're perfect for our utopia. We're bred for contemplation and self-reliance. And longevity. How old would you say I am? Oh, don't be afraid. I'm not vain.
35.
That old? I stopped aging at 30. Well, anyway, you're off by 2,000 years. I'm 2,300 years old. We were married very young. I was only 117, and he was 128. So you see, we scarcely have to move anymore, let alone work.
That's why you have no resistance.
That's right. A break in the skin or a cut can be fatal.
Come on, that was funny. That's the first time I laughed.
Spock landed his line quite nicely.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they don't need to move just because they're... And also, I don't understand why they don't die.
Yeah, because you can... Yeah, exactly. Your body will rot away. Effectively, your muscles will disintegrate if you're not using it.
There's no indication that they've used powers to stay alive or anything like that. It's just...
No, they can just manipulate objects.
Yeah, so how come they're not dead? Unless the species they're from lives quite a long time anyway.
That should be explained, though.
You would think. Anyhow, after this conversation, we see a column fall over and break, and then these sort of pieces from the game that Alexander was playing start flying around the room.
Yes, at the end of the clip there, we heard Parman start to struggle in a bit of pain, and yeah, this causes...
Yes, psychokinetic manifestations of his delirium.
And the effects are not contained just to the planet, as we see massive turbulence on the bridge, where Scotty communicates with Kirk to claim that he has seen nothing like it. I'm calling BS on that.
Yeah.
It shakes a little bit. He's seen plenty like it.
Every other week the ship shakes a wee bit.
Worse than that.
Anyway, he says he can't leave orbit because they're locked in place.
So Kirk tells him all he can do is try and weather it.
Yeah.
It's not great advice. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Kirk reports back to Spock and McCoy what's been happening on the Enterprise and encourages McCoy to sedate Parman.
But he is tossed aside when he approaches with his hypo before attention is turned to Alexander, who begs for help, resulting in, again, some great physical acting from him and Kirk. I love this.
It's just silly.
Silly's good. Silly's not bad. It doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be deep.
Yeah. Alexander begins to suffocate under the strain of Parman's powers, but McCoy is able to find a way through to give the injection, settling everything down.
Yeah, I think Felina manages to distract Parman.
Yeah, and I think McCoy shakes him as well at one point to kind of break the concentration on whatever he was doing.
Yeah, so this prevents Alexander from being choked to death, a little bit like what Darth Vader does to you. I was still waiting for the first episode where he makes an appearance.
Who?
Darth Vader.
It's later on.
Is it? Okay. Next Generation?
In the movies.
Right. Okay. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Kirk, you're not my father.
There's a bit of that in one of the movies, actually. Kirk at this point contacts Scotty, who reports that the turbulence has stopped. So Kirk says you'll definitely now be able to leave orbit.
And Felina, she offers her gratitude and tells Alexander to show their guest to their quarters.
Yeah, Kirk wants to leave at this point, but McCoy insists that they stay to make sure that his treatment is successful. That could be a first mistake there.
I think so. In any case, they are shown to their room by the excitable and grateful Alexander, who is pleased to tell Kirk that he never knew people like him existed.
Like him?
Yeah, people without the power, as we heard.
Yeah, we did hear at the top of the show.
I think it's quite a sweet exchange between the two of them.
No, it's a fairly progressive exchange as well. They do blow it a wee bit later on.
Well, I was going to say that, yes. Throughout this entire episode, Alexander is treated by Kirk and the rest of the Enterprise crew with the respect. And I was waiting for some crack or joke to come along, and it didn't until the very end, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Spock asks Alexander how the others obtained their power.
And what did he tell him?
It just came around eventually. He gets called a throwback, which means so are Kirk and Spock, and he apologises for calling them that.
But Kirk proudly claims that where they come from, size and shape and colour makes no difference, and no one has the power. I noticed that he said size, shape and colour, not sex. I mean, if you're a woman, we can still see that you're probably not quite an equal yet.
Not quite.
No, they still like to wear the mini skirts.
Well, they're really keeping their careers until they're ready to have kids and work in a kitchen.
Yeah, no, we've seen them how they treat women still. So,
and let's not start on the gays.
Oh no, let's not. Let's not. We'll leave that to Matt Damon.
Oh dear. Alexander is amazed at this revelation, but almost immediately is pulled away again from the guest room.
Yes, leaving Kirk and Spock to agree that it might not be easy to leave this planet, which is described as the galaxy's best kept secret.
Indeed. McCoy enters.
He's buoyant.
Yes, his remedy has worked. The leader is almost fever-free, and Spock compliments him, but I'm not sure if he's having a dig or not when he says that he may yet cure the common cold. Think it's a compliment?
I'm not sure. Is it?
I mean, he says it in a sarcastic voice, but I think that's just the way he speaks.
Yeah, but it's a strange thing to say.
It really is.
So it was a compliment. Because there's no real chance. He's not trying to save the common cold. So
no.
He's not trying to cure the common cold.
So I thought maybe it's almost a put down. It's like, oh, you saved the guy with a cut. Great, good job.
Yeah, but I think if we consider the relationship and the to and fro that the tete-a-tete they generally have, I think it's probably a little dig. Not in a mean-spirited way.
Just the usual.
Friendly bants.
Kirk tries to get them off the planet, but unfortunately all the systems on the Enterprise are frozen, they're still locked in orbit, and they can't contact Starfleet. So Kirk realises the problem is emanating from the planet, and it's up to him to resolve it.
Yes, so this now purposeful Kirk, he barges in to see Parman, who is being entertained by the singing Alexander, and demands to know why they are being held there.
Yes, Alexander's singing in Greek from Aristophanes the Frog.
From who? What?
Aristophanes.
Oh yeah, I know a few of them, yeah.
Indeed. Kirk tries to address Parman formally, but is told that philosopher kings have no need for titles.
Yeah, whatever.
He asks why the Enterprise is frozen, and after briefly lying to him, Parman challenges Kirk back, noting guests do not get to come in here and make demands, and then takes his phaser from him.
Kirk doesn't let up, even though Alexander tries to signal to him to pipe down. And so Parman gives him a hilarious sledgehammer-style beating. And when I say sledgehammer, I mean the TV show that I wish someone would review. I wish there was a podcast on Sledgehammer.
Oh, and there's rumours that there is one.
Is there? I'm going to look it up.
It must be brilliant.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, in that show, Sledgehammer, who's a Dirty Harry-style cop, forces a bad guy to punish himself.
Yes.
By punching himself in the face repeatedly and slamming himself into a car door. This was similar, but funnier, I thought, because it's Shatner doing it.
You can imagine Parman going, "Stop hitting yourself. Why are you hitting yourself? Stop hitting yourself."
It's multiple times and it gets faster and harder.
It's like anyone who's got a much younger brother has ever known the opportunity.
Or just a young next door neighbour.
Well, whoever. Probably not when you're an adult.
As long as there are no other adults about. Who's going to believe an 8-year-old? Come on, admit it. You watched this and you thought that was good. You enjoyed it.
I thought it was silly. I didn't understand why Shatner agreed to it, but then it got worse for him. So
it does get worse. You're thinking that's what I'm trying to work out. And when he read the script,
yeah, why did he not just hand it back with the word "no" written in the cover in big red ink?
I'm assuming you've got trivia about this.
No, there's no trivia. He just did it.
Well, maybe it shows that they were good sports. They were up for it. Yeah, no problem. Whatever. I'm an actor.
It doesn't sound likely.
You pay me to do this. Again, we have to remember at this point it's the start of the show, but it still hasn't.
It's not a huge show at this point.
It's not a huge show. It's getting cancelled shortly. I
suppose he does need to show his range in case someone needs a horse for another show. Back in the guest room.
Yeah, he was going to play one of the leads in the Lone Ranger. Going to be ridden by the Lone Ranger. That's a different movie
altogether. Kirk's back in the guest room. He can't contact Scotty at all now, and Spock notes that Parman must have made this decision to prevent it. McCoy's a bit confused because he doesn't realise up until now that there was a problem.
Yeah. And then we have another piece of physical acting, hilarious physical acting, as all three are forced out of the room by this power.
Yeah, McCoy first stands up stiffly and says, "I don't know where I'm going. I can't stop it." It's a bit like, it reminds me a bit of the Simpsons episode when Bart's swinging his arms saying, "I'm just walking and punching." And it gets in my way. It's their own fault.
Come on, I'm turning around here. You're starting to come to my way of thinking, aren't you? This episode is brilliant. It's not terrible. I mean, it's only terrible You know how you frame it in your mind, what you're looking for, what your standards are. If you just shift that slightly, and you look for comedy, and you look for trying something different, you look for something that they're getting stuck into. They don't mind making themselves look like complete
like a
idiots.
drama student's workshop for over-eager young actors.
Come on, but it's not as if they don't ham it up anyway.
This is worse.
When you say worse, you mean better.
They're in Parman's chambers now, and Alexander sounds a horn as the door opens.
It's what he does. What?
He sounds a horn.
All right. I thought he said he sounds horny.
No, he just sounds a horn.
Okay.
Felina makes a speech and presents gifts to each of their honoured guests.
Yeah. Now, as this was happening, there was the score here reminded me very much of Columbo. I actually looked into it to see if it was the same. There was no connection.
No.
But the score was the type of score that would be used in Columbo when they're showing you the murderer setting up or doing what he's doing.
Do you remember the gifts they all got?
Somebody got like a harp.
Yeah, Spock got a kitara, which is an instrument.
Yeah.
Kirk got the shield of Pericles.
And Matt gets some information.
Yeah, some scrolls from Hippocrates himself.
It's like, you can imagine back in the day when you were a kid, someone gives you a present for you get a toy, you get this, and you get a book token. It's like...
Yeah, it's like in Lord of the Rings when the two other hobbits get nice little swords and Sam gets a rope. And he's like, do you have any more of those nice shiny daggers?
In any case, Parman then apologises for his behaviour and tries to explain it away, which Kirk accepts before asking if the Enterprise has now been released.
He's told it will be soon, so Kirk agrees to leave, but there's a problem.
Yeah, it's not quite as straightforward as what they would like.
After my nearly fatal infection, it has become obvious to us all that we cannot afford to be without a skilled physician. Therefore, we should like you, Dr. McCoy, to remain.
I'm very sorry, but that's impossible.
Your duties will be extraordinarily light. You should be free to read, to meditate, to conduct research, whatever you like. You will want for nothing.
The answer is no.
We should like to keep it cordial, but we are determined to have you stay, Doctor.
Dr. McCoy saved your life.
I am losing patience, Captain.
And you consider yourself a disciple of Plato?
We managed to live in peace and harmony.
Whose harmony? Yours? Plato wanted truth and beauty, and above all, justice.
My dear Mr. Spock, I admit that circumstances have forced us to make a few adaptations of Plato, but ours is the most democratic society conceivable. Anyone can, at any moment, be or do anything he wishes, even to becoming ruler of Platonius, if his mind is strong enough.
And if his mind isn't strong enough, he gets torn apart like Alexander.
Oh, come now, we are not children. In your culture, justice is the will of the stronger. It is forced upon people by means of weapons and fleets of spaceships. Our justice is the will of the stronger mind, and I, for one, consider it a vast improvement.
We don't use our weapons for the kind of brutality you practice.
Farewell, Captain.
Come on, bud.
I mean, he's got a point about, democracy at the moment. It's the bigger powers with the bigger weapons get to do what they want and bully the rest. That's
what's the difference between force of arms and force of will?
None.
Which is better?
Well, force of will is better, isn't it? Unless you don't
chop people up
and kill them, yeah.
Just make them dance. Kirk calls on McCoy to come with him at this point, but he is frozen in place. And Kirk reminds Parman that the Platonians will need McCoy's free will.
And of course, he insists they won't go without their friend. And at this, Felina shows her true colours by telling Parman not to discuss it, just get rid of them.
Yeah, of course. Parman doesn't want to upset the Doctor, though, who he brings to a seat next to his own.
And so he invites them to stay and celebrate their anniversary and perhaps be persuaded to join this republic of theirs. However, McCoy claims he won't be persuaded. So Parman pulls him towards himself and then drops floral headpieces at the feet of Kirk and Spock, who are forced to wear them before bowing and then doing what?
They kind of dance around each other and sing a stupid rhyme, do a bit of Shakespeare, and ultimately are tortured with pain.
And humiliation. The humiliation's worse than the pain.
Well, a little bit. In between all this Kirk urges McCoy not to succumb, and Spock is then forced to dance over Kirk's head and ending that with a boot to the face.
Yeah, it was a nice little puppet Spock, wasn't it?
Which puppet Spock do you prefer, this one or the one from Spock's brain?
Spock's brain, because McCoy was controlling him.
Yeah, it was more fun.
Yeah. He seems to be fighting it, and it drops to the ground beside Kirk. But he then starts to laugh uncontrollably.
McCoy's outraged by this, saying that forcing emotions out of Spock could harm him. There's no indication of that in any other episode. In fact, he shows emotions every now and then.
Yeah, but he's not. But he's not forced.
Yeah, he starts crying at this point, and Kirk urges him to hold on,
not to let them break him. And for his trouble, Kirk now has to move like an animal, which causes Alexander to cry out that he is ashamed to be a Platonian.
Alexander is then made to climb on Kirk's back and ride him like a horsey.
When he's...
Yes.
Which causes McCoy to reconsider his opinion. This is brilliant.
That's not stupid.
No, I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say it a few times. Big smile on my face watching this. Great. But it doesn't all have to be serious. It doesn't always have to be, the message in here is about the human race. And there is a reasonably strong message in this episode, I think, which is fine. But it is garnished with nonsense and frivolity and humiliation.
And amdram.
Yep. But what you're getting professional actors pretending to be amdram.
It's, the way I feel about this is, if you were a writer and you hated William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and you had the opportunity to write a script for Star Trek, this is the script that you would write.
Yes, and if that was the case, that'd be even better. You see, my view, maybe I'm wrong here, is that the nerds and the geeks out there who hate this, it's because they love Shatner and they think he's a respected, and Captain Kirk. Now, we've discussed many times, I think Kirk, and especially, can be a right pain in the backside, and he's brought down a peg or two occasionally. I don't love the character in the sense that I don't think he's brilliant. I think he slaps women, and I think he's got a lot of negative traits, and he's not a great captain. But I still like the guy. But I have no problem with him being humiliated. The same goes for Spock. I have absolutely that doesn't bother me. I enjoy it.
It reminds me when I was at school, we used to write scripts out, make folk do them.
What do you mean make folk do scripts at school? What school did you go to? That's a really soft school.
This was in our free time.
We used to make people smoke fags and...
No, this was on the weekends. Oh dear.
We used to make folk smoke cigarettes and then drink and beat them up.
Well, you were the guys that we avoided.
Yeah. No, well, I didn't do that, but that's the type of thing that you would... If people were made to do things at school...
We had a group of friends and we wrote these scripts and we made folk do them, and there's one guy that would say just to pick on one day, and in the script his character was an evil robot that had to be made wet to deactivate him.
Whoa.
So literally everyone else in the entire cast poured buckets of water over this guy's head.
Yeah.
Well, is this that same sort of thing?
It might be. I'm just going back to I'm just trying to imagine. We did not go to the same school, obviously, as each other. So that's how you bullied people. You bullied people in school.
That wasn't really bullying.
Well, you were making them do things, but your bullying in school was writing embarrassing scripts for them. I'm sorry, that's not proper bullying. When I was a lad, right, you didn't burst lips and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well,
he could beat. He didn't give him a bad script. He didn't go. Was it Hollywood High you went to?
No.
Where that was the worst thing you could get out. A really bad script.
You break out in a musical number in the middle of math.
Dearie me. I know times have changed, but still.
I'm sure there's a VCR tape available of it somewhere.
I would love to see that. Yeah,
I don't have it.
We've discussed this before. You done fan fiction, didn't you?
You recorded
this.
Yeah,
I would love to get a hold of that so much.
I would like to get a hold of it so nobody else could get a hold of it.
No, if I ever get a hold of that, listeners, it will be going on YouTube.
I suspect it doesn't exist anymore. The person who had it probably doesn't keep it.
I'm going to try and find it. Who did you play
in these? Sure, I was the first officer on the ship. I can't remember the name of the character.
Almighty.
It's entirely possible that the characters had their own names.
Right, okay. I need to see that. Anyway, how old were you?
14, 15.
Oh, dear me.
I mean, there's girls in it. It wasn't just...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, where were we?
We're moving to the guest room because Spock is now very withdrawn, and Kirk asks McCoy if there's anything to be done, and then suddenly, even though McCoy says no, there's not, he has to come over to it himself. Spock seems fine.
Yeah, I think he tries to play down what happened.
He asks if Kirk has been hurt, and they have an exchange over how healthy it can be to release emotion, with Spock noting that quite often when you release emotion, it's unhealthy for the folk around you.
He then asks Kirk how he feels about Parman at that moment, and he admits he hates him, as does McCoy. In a movie, it would be an adult movie. There would have been other things would have been done to them, you know.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Human centipede stuff.
That sort of sexual violence and humiliation. That's what.
Fortunately, that's not the series that we're watching.
Yeah.
Spock tells Kirk and McCoy they need to overcome this hatred, and he will try to master his own, but he can't. He's struggling, and he breaks a glass in frustration.
Kirk goes to try and calm him, but McCoy advises against it. And with Spock back in his trance, he tells Kirk that he has changed his mind.
This is senseless. I've thought it over. I'm staying.
You can't.
But Parman has promised me you'll be safe.
Promised. Parman. He let us beam up to the Enterprise and then plunge the ship back into the atmosphere.
Why? Why trick me?
Because if he killed us outright in front of you, you'd retaliate. You're a doctor. You have the means. Bones. I know you're trying to do the right thing. But if any one of us escaped, Parman knows that Starfleet would never let this planet go unpunished. Sacrifice yourself by agreeing to stay and you sign our death warrant.
He's right. I should have warned you. They were treating you the same way they treat me, just like me. Only you fight them. All the time, I thought it was me, my mind that couldn't even move a pebble. They even told me I was lucky they bothered to keep me around at all, and I believed them. The arms and legs of everybody's whim. Look down. Don't meet their eyes. Smile. Smile. Those great people. They were gods to me. But you showed me what they really are. And now I know, don't you see? It's not me. It's not my size. It's them. It's them.
At this, Alexander smashes a vase and picks up a piece as a weapon, which he insists he is going to use to cut the rest of them so that they get infected.
Kirk urges him to sit it down, but Alexander says that they'll kill them anyway, and please let him cut them all first.
So, Kirk asks if that is the case, what is the point in him dying as well? And at this, the sobbing Alexander hands it over and remarks that it's the first time anyone has put his life first and regrets not telling them of the plans when they first arrived.
He's quite overwhelmed at this point, I think.
Yeah, and I also thought it was nice here that they didn't use, or Kirk didn't use, this must be nice for Shatner to have someone where he's like bigger than them.
He doesn't have to wear other shoes.
Yeah. No, I thought it was nice that they didn't use their physical attributes to just take the weapon from Alexander. They could have easily done a comedy moment here where they pick him up or do something, like that, and they didn't.
Yep.
So
far so good.
So far so good, yeah.
Kirk tells Alexander at this point there may be something he can do to help, and he asks him more about the powers that the others have.
Yeah, he tells them that they didn't have it until they came to this planet, and Spock wants to know how long it took.
He says 6 months and 14 days, and Spock estimates that they had 3 or 4 months of supplies when they arrived, so the powers came after eating local foods for 2 or 3 months.
Can I just say, he remembers exactly because that was when they first started pushing him around, but even if you were bullied, you don't remember it to the 6 months and 14 days.
Odd, isn't it? Yeah. And they're trying to make a point.
He then makes a massive leap, that is...
Spock does.
Spock, yeah.
Yes, he concludes there's a connection between the psychokinetic powers and the eating of the native foods. So, wondering why Alexander wasn't affected, they scan him and compare his results to Parman's from earlier on.
What does it reveal?
The only significant difference is a concentration of kyanide broken down by pituitary hormone. Alexander's is much lower. Apparently it's the same hormone that controls body growth.
Yeah, it was all a bit.
I don't know why Spock had to say that, it's irrelevant.
It is.
Anyone else who came to the planet will acquire the power eventually.
And so Kirk jumps to action and asks McCoy if there is a way of building up the concentration quickly in their blood.
Yeah, McCoy says it'll take some doing, but is immediately able to do it.
This is very rushed.
Yeah.
This whole getting...
It's not possible. So, here, have a jag. Yes, you Powers.
However, they realise that even if it has the desired effect, there are still 38 of them.
And then this reasoning is really weak, I think.
Very, very weak.
Spock says it's not an additive power, so 38 people trying to influence you to do something is only the same strength as one.
That's nonsense. If I was fighting 38 people, they can't add their strength isn't combined together. It's just 38 different.
Yeah.
They
So you defeat one, you've got another 37.
Yeah,
to
they would
go.
still beat the beep out of you.
Yeah. Alexander, though, says that Parman also has this theory and refers to it as different power frequencies.
In any case, McCoy has got his hypo of the stuff ready, and Kirk asks for double the concentration that Parman has. No consideration to any sort of side effects
It's
of what
still
might
going to hurt you
happen.
now.
Nah, just get double dose.
Take the vaccine.
Yeah, you should take the vaccine. I wouldn't take a double dose of it, mate. The vaccine, if you give me a double dose, it'll be twice as good.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you do get double doses. Just
Eventually, just over a period of time. Alexander refuses a jab himself. He says he doesn't want to become like the others. He just wants to leave with Kirk and
Anti-vaxxer.
Co. He wants to leave with Kirk
He's
and
not even
Co.
wearing a mask.
No, when they go. And then suddenly everything changes.
Why?
Because Uhura and Chapel appear.
Yes. They struggle to speak and are then promptly marched off, clearly under the power.
And Kirk thinks this is a great moment to make a joke.
What does he say?
He says that they must not be entertaining enough. I think he's misjudged the room there slightly.
In the chamber, Uhura and Chapel seem to be more in control as they walk into the room wearing new clothes and hairstyles, I think.
So they've been forced to change.
The power's changed them. Some you just see the dresses being removed by the power to the striptease theme tune.
Kirk and Spock come in and the same things happen to them. They're now wearing short tunics and laurel wreaths.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
The women are pleased to see Kirk and Spock, but concerned that they are now puppets. What I liked about this though is Kirk and Spock completely ignore the questions
They do.
that they're asked and just talk to one another.
They walk away. Yeah, no, good to see you. Are you safe? Are you well? What's happening? Yeah, it's just like, all
Completely
right.
blank them.
And Kirk says, okay, we're going to see if we've got these powers. We'll try with something small, that massive plate of fruit. They don't say we'll move a grape first.
Yeah,
it's
or a
like-
rock.
It's the entire plate. I mean, have you watched Matilda? It takes her ages to move a pencil or a glass of water.
It's like the start of when they made the new X-Men movies and you've got Magneto trying to move a coin.
Right.
You can't do it.
No. And he's going right in with a big platter of fruit. It's quite heavy.
Huh? Anyhow, yes, it doesn't work. And then shutters draw back.
Well, during this, they've heard laughter coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
And the walls open to reveal the source. A viewing gallery with the locals as well as McCoy and Alexander watching on. Parman is there, and he stands to deliver a speech.
Fellow academicians, 2,500 years ago, a band of hardy vagabonds arrived on this barren, rough-hewn planet. Points of desperate hardship, of backbreaking toil. And then a divine providence graced our genius and our dedication with the power of powers. And through it, our every need instantly materialized. We thereupon determined to form a utopian brotherhood. This night is indeed a festive occasion, for tonight we welcome into that brotherhood its first new member.
Not yet, Parman. You have to convince the doctor first.
They'll never do it, Jim.
Doctor, please. You destroyed the festive mood of the ladies. We must recapture it at once. I know. What would be better than a serenade from the laughing spaceman?
Take care, young ladies, and value your wine. Be watchful of young men in their velvet prime. Deeply they'll swallow from your finest kegs. Then swiftly be gone leaving bitter dregs. Ah, bitter dregs.
Thank God you stopped the clip there.
Yeah, I couldn't go on much longer. I thought the start of it sounded like the beginning of A Stairway to Heaven. But anyway, that's about as close as you're going to get to it. I think Leonard Nimoy must have thought he was brilliant. I think he was quite proud of this, probably.
He wrote it.
Did he?
Yeah.
So he loved this. He's pretending he's embarrassed about having to do this, but he's thinking, yes, I'm the
I can
star.
demonstrate my
I'll
talents.
probably get some sort of record deal out of this.
Tony Award on the way. Anyhow, Parman then moves things around, leaving Chapel and Spock on one couch and Kirk and Uhura on the other. And then Kirk and Spock swap over and then they go back.
Yeah, they're going to woo these two women. A distressed Chapel pleads to Spock to make them stop, but he apologises and admits that he can't do it.
She says she's ashamed because for so long she's wanted to be close to him and now she wants to crawl away and die.
He's such a... Yeah, he's like, you repulse me.
After that song.
And yeah, look at you, little cuck. Oh, it's terrible.
They're forced to kiss and someone in the crowd makes a joke about Cupid's arrow killing Vulcans.
Yeah, and this Alexander is brought to tears. Kirk is up next with Uhura, who admits she is frightened, and he tries to calm her down and tell her to try and not think of the laughing audience.
She gives a wee spiel about how he always makes her feel safe and that she's no longer afraid before they two are forced to kiss in an iconic television moment.
Okay, yep, so this is something I was aware of before we started the podcast, something I think we maybe mentioned in the opening episode.
Yep.
I must say I was disappointed for a number of reasons here.
Okay.
Firstly, it was barely a kiss.
Barely.
You don't even see it, and there's no passion involved. But secondly, they make such a big deal about this, but this was forced. I was under the impression, wrongly obviously, that this was the first interracial kiss on television between two characters who had been written to show some sort of romance, and it was a genuine kiss.
The message is very clear. He may be kissing this black woman here, but he will not be kissing anymore.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to be doing this.
Doesn't want to do it.
This is like a sexual violence. You're forcing people to do something against their will. It's an act of violence. It's not an act of love. There's nothing sensual about this. There's nothing intimate about this. I say, I don't think he even does it. It's an over-the-shoulder shot, I think. You don't see the lips touching. And Kirk is staring away at Felina at this point. I was really, really disappointed in this. And I thought that, that the kiss was something bigger and better and something that you could be proud of. But looking at it now, you're thinking that this isn't breaking down any barriers. This is a man being forced to, or a man and a woman being forced to kiss. You can't hold this up and say, look, as a show, we were the first to break down this barrier and be proud of it. That's not how it's been written. I'm sorry, I'm really disappointed. I think it's a nonsense that it's still talked about in the way it is. It's misleading. It's clickbait stuff.
I mean, what we can't say is how it seemed at the time to the audience watching it for the first time. But
the fact that they were touching it, it's like, but I'm sorry, it's just not. It wasn't a kiss. It was a forced touching of lips. The whole point of it is it's showing a relationship between two races. That was what what it should represent. The coming together, the willful.
Yeah, rather than being forced to do something they would never normally do.
Exactly. Yeah. The message there isn't. Yeah, as you said at the start there, the message isn't about how two people from two different races got together and they can live in harmony and they love each other and there's no barrier there. They've been forced to do it. They've been tortured. This was for someone else's amusement.
Yeah.
So no, I'm sorry. Thumbs down to this. It wasn't as big a deal, and it's not as impressive from the show as what I thought and expected.
Okay.
That's harsh, but that's how I see it.
That's how you feel. Felina at this point urges Parman to get on with it, but he notes the Doctor remains unmoved. So a table with a whip and various other weapons is brought out as Kirk and Spock walk towards it.
Kirk picks up a whip and Spock a hot iron as they turn and walk towards Uhura and Chapel.
Ooh.
Kirk seems to be fighting it.
They're doing their best.
He shouts at the gallery that they are all half dead and have been for centuries.
And they can't stand to see people living, but he's then made to crack the whip in front of Uhura. We see Alexander sneaking away at this point.
And Spock, he approaches Chapel with the iron. McCoy shouts for Parman to stop, and at this point, he finally snaps and agrees that he will stay with him if he wants.
But as he does, Alexander launches himself at Parman with a knife.
However, Velena spots this and stops him, allowing Parman to force Alexander to raise the blade above his own head in what looks like it's going to be an act of suicide, ramming it into his stomach, no doubt.
Yes, but before he can, Alexander finds himself released from Parman's grip.
Whoa, how did that happen?
Well, Kirk first takes credit, and then Spock finds that he too is no longer under control.
Parman doesn't believe it, but Spock tells him that not only is this possible, it's also logical. And Kirk threatens to hurt any of them who try their nonsense, as they now apparently have power at twice their level.
Yeah, the Platonians start to panic, and Alexander is sent after Kirk with the knife by Parman.
Yeah, he becomes the focus of a power struggle as he is moved back and forth in the battle between the two leaders, which Kirk eventually wins.
Yes, and the dagger ends up inches from Parman, who begins to whimper and beg for mercy.
Yeah, he offers to do anything, they say, if they will only spare his life.
At this point, Alexander wants Kirk to let him finish Parman off, and I'm a bit concerned about the ethics of Kirk holding Alexander back here.
In what sense?
You shouldn't be using the powers on Alexander if it's not to save people.
It's saving people, it's saving Parman.
No, still, you're not saving him from Parman, you're saving him from Alexander's free will.
But I don't have an issue with this. But authorities do it all the time. You can't, you're preventing Alexander firstly committing a
Yeah, but you're
crime.
not better than the others, you're just using your powers to make Alexander do what you want.
No, I think you are better than others. You're doing it for the right reasons. You're not doing it to
They think
humiliate.
they're doing it for the right reasons.
No, they don't. They're doing it for their own enjoyment. They know it. No, I think I don't know. I disagree with you on this one.
To give Kirk credit, though, he does then ask Alexander if he wants to be like Parman, and he does allow him to surrender the knife voluntarily. Before Alexander addresses Parman himself.
What does he say?
He says that he could have had this power, but he refused it and is sickened by the others. He considers them the most contemptible things that ever lived in the universe.
Parman then rises and approaches Kirk, where he notes with astonishment that he knew he intended to destroy them and the Enterprise, and yet he was spared.
Kirk says that's not his style, but he does have some concern for future visitors.
And so a nervous Parman promises that everyone will be safe from now on, and that he realises they've been unproductive and only existing, I think he says, to nourish their own power, and they'll welcome any interstellar visitors from now on.
Kirk and Spock don't believe him.
No, they think that he'll return to his old ways as soon as they leave.
And Parman concedes that is probably true.
So this doesn't sit particularly well.
They leave.
Yeah. Well, they remind him they can return any time. Like, yeah, but you probably remember we'll come back.
You won't get any presents this Christmas. Yeah. Kirk then decides to leave, and everybody is beamed up with a special message for Scotty.
Yep, and this is the final hurdle they let themselves down. He tells Scotty to prepare to beam them up, and that he has a little surprise for him.
I mean, you could look at that generously and say it's not a reference to Alexander's
It is
stature.
a reference. It is exactly a reference, but it's precisely that.
Yes, it's the end of the episode. Let's all have a laugh.
At his height, yeah. We got through the whole thing.
Yeah, we've made you take him seriously for an hour. Now you can laugh at him.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame.
It's a shame, because genuinely, for the time especially, handle this with integrity.
Yeah, delicacy.
Yeah.
That's the end of the episode.
There is a few problems, including that. But overall, yep, I'd watch this again.
Were you satisfied with the way it was resolved?
Oh, they wrapped up quite quickly. No, it wasn't.
It's almost like they cut something.
Yeah. For me, this episode isn't about how it gets how it gets resolved and what the conclusion is.
It's about Shatner as a horse.
It's about Shatner as a horse, yeah. And
was that your favourite of the humiliations?
I think so, yeah.
That more than Nimoy's song?
Oh, maybe the face slapping.
Yeah, stop hitting yourself.
Yeah. No, I thought it's good to see them try something different.
Yeah, okay. I don't agree. Well, no, I don't disagree that it's good to try something different. It's just that it shouldn't be this.
Okay.
I was going to ask if you thought the episode deserved credit for the kiss, but you've already got into that in some detail, so we'll not start you off again, and instead we'll get into some trivia.
Okay.
Original air date 22nd of November 1968. David Alexander directed the episode. This was the first of two and I'm pretty sure the next one is even worse. He was an experienced director by this time. He'd worked on shows like The Real McCoys, My Favourite Martian, and The Munsters. He died in 1983 when he was 68. The writer was Meyer Dolinsky. This was his only Star Trek episode, but he had already had a prolific screenwriting career up to this point, contributing to shows like The Outer Limits, Mission Impossible, and Bonanza.
What was his first name?
Meyer.
Appropriate.
He died in 1984 when he was 60. Michael Dunn played Alexander. This was his only Star Trek role, but he had a recurring part on The Wild Wild West and appeared on many other shows, including Bonanza and Get Smart. He was a concert pianist and a cheerleader as a child.
A what?
A concert pianist and a cheerleader.
A cheerleader?
A cheerleader.
What do you mean?
He cheerled.
For who?
Sports teams.
Oh.
Before taking up singing and acting at college, he was nominated for a Tony Award in 1963 and for an Oscar in 1965, but he experienced frustration at the lack of variety in the roles he was offered, and he died during filming for a movie called The Abdication in 1974 when he was just 38.
Oh, that's sad. He was brilliant in this. And if he just held on a little bit, I'm sure he'd have been in all the Star Trek movies.
I could have got Willow. Anyway, Liam Sullivan played Parman. This was his only Star Trek role, but he appeared in many other popular series, including Lost in Space, The A-Team, and Dallas. He died in April of 1998 at the age of 74. Barbara Babcock played Felena. This was the 5th of her 6 roles for the series. You can hear more about her in the podcast For a Taste of Armageddon. Derek Partridge played one of the other Platonians. He has clearly written his own IMDb bio, so please do read it for a bit of insight.
Is he really handsome and talented?
Well, you need to read it. It's very much worth it. He only made this one Star Trek appearance, but he's also shown up on the Bond movie Thunderball, in T.J. Hooker, and on Murder, She Wrote, amongst other things. He's still working. He recently turned 86.
I'll definitely have came across him then if he's been on Murder, She Wrote and T.J. Hooker.
No doubt. Frida Renti was an uncredited performer playing a science officer on the Enterprise in this episode. She is so uncredited that IMDb doesn't even list her for this episode.
Where'd you get her from?
Well,
Memory Alpha?
She was largely a background actor throughout her career, appearing in shows like The Twilight Zone, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and 2 episodes of Columbo, for which she was also uncredited.
What episodes?
Candidate for Crime, she was a campaign worker.
Okay.
And Try and Catch Me, she was a lunch guest.
Right.
So that makes her this week's connection, and she is now 88 years old. The story goes that William Shatner ruined an alternative take of the Kirk Uhura kiss, where they didn't kiss, by crossing his eyes and staring at the camera. Nichelle Nichols recounts that tale in her autobiography. I've already told you that the song that Spock sang was written by Leonard Nimoy. This episode was banned in the UK on account of the sadistic violence and was not shown for the first time until 1993.
What? 90s?
Yes. Banned for almost 30 years.
Jeez.
This is the last episode to have a completely original score. You referenced the score earlier on. In terms of international titles, in France it was called La Descendants, The Descendants. In Japan, it was
Here we go.
Kironaido no Marioku, which translates to Magical Power of Kironide. While in Italy, it was Umiliati per Forza Maggiore, which means humiliated by superior force.
That's better.
That was my favourite one this week. Next time, it's the 11th episode of Season 3, Wink of an Eye, which I had genuinely forgotten existed, but we'll get around to it in a week's time. In the meantime, social media, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, where we're at Trek Podcast, or you can go to www.astartrekpodcast.com, where you will find a post for each and every show. Leave your thoughts, views and reminiscences, and we will see you in 7 days' time.
Until then,
cheerio.
Bye-bye.